I want to go back to discussing wellness. It's something that I think a lot of athletes, like I just recorded a solo episode on, are you too big for bikini? Like, should you go figure wellness? And this is largely for those amateur competitors or maybe individuals at the national level who are getting that feedback to tone down their legs, or they need more glutes, and like maybe they're on the cusp of training a little too hard, or they just feel like genetically like they're predisposed to build muscle easily. There are other divisions, yes, but you brought up an excellent point. I'm so glad you touched on it. Is with that kind of muscularity, there really isn't any ability to let off the gas, because you're going to lose muscle if you're not training and supporting that muscle. And even though, yeah, you could just like, turn it back on whenever you get ready for shows, a lot of those girls, I mean, they're creating so much density in their bodies that like it's a pretty big commitment. And like we were talking about, or we've talked about previously, is like you're also committing to an aspect of pharmacology on that side that I don't think a lot of people truly understand or want to believe, like, oh, well, it won't happen to me. Like, I'll do it smart. I'll do it safely. But I think people get lost in like the competition of it and begin to layer compounds on top of compounds. And then oftentimes they find themselves where they're losing their femininity, things are changing, and they're still not where they want to be. And they still have muscle to build, which I think, for wellness for you, I remember following, your training at that time, and like you were really committing and trying to see like how much muscle you could put on. But you even brought up the point about your structure, and like I have a tiny little torso and super long femurs. And like, I know if I've been told to do wellness, and I'm just like, that's so much real estate to fill out. And I don't think it's nearly as easy as people think, oh, just decide, like, I want to do it. Or to your point, like then the commitment year round to just maintain that muscularity, it's a lot. So when we go into how you were able to bring down the legs, balance out the hips, because that was the feedback you got, is like too much hips, and you have a very, very tiny waist, so it's like creating that depth and projection that they want. What was the focus in your camp or in that season where you're focusing on just like really the density without growing the legs anymore? What did training look like? That's probably an easy place to start.
We removed between the season 2024 and now, we remove all the hamstrings exercises and all the glutes exercises with a knee flexion. And we remove also the abduction movements, because the abduction, they just make the glutes wider, but not mandatory with more projection. The only way to get more projection for me, into my opinion, is like the hip thrust with the feet a little bit closer, not too wide, and also the kickbacks. So not too much on the side, but more straight behind. In fact, yes, we just removed all the knee flexion, because otherwise the hip flexors would also grow, and everything around the knee also. So basically, this is how I succeed to appear having more projection on the glutes, because it's just an appearance. I don't have more projection on the glutes. This is just looking like, because the point is that my glutes, they were much more shells before last year, and now on the back pose only, they look like they project better, but in real, they are so much flatter. And on the paper with the centimeter, they are way much flatter. And that's always something that I wondered to myself when I was going to USA. I was like, how do the girls look like they have so much projection on the glutes on stage, but when I look in backstage, they don't have the shelf? I was really wondering why nobody got the shelf. Literally
Yeah.
nobody. The only girl getting the shelf, I don't remember. I don't remember. But there is not a lot of girl having this lower back curve and the glutes doing this. And I was like, looking at myself, I got that. But on the back pose, I was looking totally pancake.
Yeah.
And
No, I know what you mean. Yeah.
I never understood. I was like, okay, maybe it's the posing. No, it was not the posing. It was just the fact that my hips were too wide and my glutes also were too wide.
I love that you almost are framing it like it's the proportions. It's the proportions and the density to the hamstrings or even like the upper quad that can oftentimes make the hips, like if you're working like the TFL, like that little muscle in the front hip, the more you're layering on top of that, it just creates a different kind of look. And it's something that like I myself, like I don't have very developed hamstrings or quads, but I also keep that in mind is like, do I need a lot of the isolation work, like the direct hamstring or the direct quad work? And I've actually like opted out of it entirely because I'm like, if I'm going to do something like a split squat or an RDL, I'm going to get some hamstring and quad activation from it. And I'd rather those, if they're glute biased, be like the centerpiece and then like kind of have the trickle off effect of like, okay, some hamstring, some quad from this rather than just direct leg extensions or hamstring curls or things that are intended to like tone up those areas when in reality, it's like those little changes, like a little bit more in circumference of these areas can just change that look visually, how it's presented, especially at low body fats.
Exactly, yes. And the point is that, for example, for my case, I needed to lose the hips, lose the legs, and lose the definition, so the density into the hamstrings. And if, for example, I keep the lunges, even if they are glutes focused, I will never lose the legs. They will keep working, but the glutes will not improve compared to the legs. They will all improve at the same rate. So the problem will just stay the same. So if you really want to lose one muscle, you have to definitely give up. You have to keep high cardio, maintenance calories, not a lot of surplus because you need to lose some muscle. And then when you lose enough muscle, you have to adapt the macros. You have to push a little bit more the calorie on glutes day, for example, without knee flexion or things like this. But it's all very tiny parameters to change the aspect of the muscle than the aspect of the back pose. It was a total nightmare. Like honestly, it was nightmare because there was my husband who does my training. There is my coach who does my uh, meal prep and cardio, and he decides which type of training we do. And there was me like saying, no, okay, I need that. And we were the three of us deciding together, but it was a nightmare. Nightmare.
I can imagine. No, and I feel like it's a conversation that I have with a lot of clients who, let's say their glutes are very underdeveloped or their legs are very underdeveloped to the point it's like maybe early on you can get away with less specific training, but we should still keep this in mind. We should still understand like correct positioning and the function of these muscles. Or sorry, like function at like, let's say the hip or even like the pelvis to ensure we can recruit the glutes, not just simply like going in and doing it because you saw a girl online doing it. Like making sure that like you are actually having intention in the training session and that you know what it feels like when you're not working the right muscle, which you brought up the measurements, which, I mean, listeners know, like I'm a really big fan for myself and for clients tracking, yes, the scale weight, but then also making sure that we're noticing, trends in the circumference of the hips and then really even like the glute fold. So like right at like the bottom of the glute, kind of where we're going to see the tie-in for most people. That's typically where I lose fat. That's the last place I lose fat.
Same,
So I
same.
need, right. And I need to keep an eye on it so that if it's getting bigger, I also need to compare that to the calipers. So like how much is it fat versus muscle so that I can make those decisions around whether or not to continue pushing food or whether it's time to pull back. And I just love how meticulous you've been, really, and how open and vulnerable you've been with these changes because you're very honest that like, hey, this isn't easy. And this is not your first pick. Like you would bring a different look if you could, but that's not what's being rewarded. And I commend you on that because I think a lot of people can get lost in like, I want to look the most extreme or I want to look the way that I want to look. And they forget that like, you're going to be judged based on the criteria. And at the pro level, they do have looks that they want for you, or they have looks that they're a little more partial to. So being able to take that feedback and implement it. And I mean, like, I thought you looked so good, at FIBO. Like, I mean, I was really, really gunning for you. And I thought like, for sure, like it was going to be tough. Evie looked great, but you know, like, and sorry, I guess I should say huge congratulations to her for the win. But I was just really impressed with your physique and the changes that you've made, because it's one thing if you're just like, yep, this is how I need to show up. Like Ashley Kay, very consistent. She shows up and she has like those things that I would say largely like dialed in. But when you're an athlete like yourself, or even like myself, where you're just told like, we need big changes here for you to do well,
Yes.
it takes longer.